So welcome guys, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us from all over the world. We're happy to have you guys here. Just to kind of introduce myself, my name is Esther and I work in the International Relations Department with CSO Education Group. And my colleague over here is going to introduce himself as well.
Hi, my name is Shane and I'm the Director of International Relations Department with CSO Education Group. And thanks for joining us. I hope you will enjoy this webinar.
Yep, and just to remind you guys, we are going to be giving you the e-certificates. We just ask that you give us a few days. Our design team works really hard to make you guys each have your own certificate. So please expect that by email. You won't need to do anything else. You'll receive your e-certificate as long as you've participated and joined today. So I'd like to be able to introduce our company a little more to you guys. So a few of our products and services, so we do offer both online and in-person study abroad opportunities, and they typically range between 1 to 2 months. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can definitely check out our website, which is listed at the bottom of the slide there. You can look there and you can check out our different destinations. You'll see that we have lots of different partner universities all over the world, and you can read more and learn more about the different options. We also have various virtual faculty-led programs. One of our upcoming programs is the entrepreneurship program, which is going to be a 4-week program. If you are interested in joining that, we are more than happy to share information with you and further details, so please reach out to us if you'd like to learn more. The other thing we do offer is we do offer both online and in-person university courses that you can receive credit for, so we can help you get those credits recognized by your university that you're currently enrolled at. The other thing we do provide is we are working on master's programs. So if you're interested in doing an MBA or another type of master's program, reach out to us and we'd love to be able to give you feedback and help you out with selecting the best option for you. We do provide scholarships and financial aid as well as academic support. So we'd love to be able to share more information if that's something you'd like to hear more of. Okay, and just to give you guys a chance to follow us and to join our different groups. We'd love to be able to keep in contact with you guys. It's a good place for us to reach out to all of you at the same time and give you reminders about webinars and when you can expect to receive your e-certificate and other updates and other news. So please feel free to join, take a picture of this screen if you'd like, and we'll be waiting for you to join us. Okay, and now to introduce our guest speaker, I'd love to be able to welcome Dr. Chikwendu Christian Ukaegbu. So here you can see his bio, and I will just go through that with you guys. He's a professor of sociology and global development, and he obtained his bachelor's degree from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and PhD from Northwestern University, Evanston, Illinois. Ukaegbu served on the academic staff of the University of Nigeria, was professor of sociology and international studies at the University of Wyoming, senior Fulbright research fellow at the University of California, Berkeley, and held visiting appointments at Saratov State University in Russia, the Academy of International Economic Affairs in Hsinchu, Taiwan, and international summer school programs at Qingdao University and SIAS International University in China. Ukaegbu was head of sociology department and the director of African American Studies and director of international studies at the University of Wyoming. He joined Northwestern University as a distinguished senior lecturer in sociology, after which he retired from active academic service. He is currently adjunct faculty in sociology at the University of Wyoming and at the Rosary College of Arts and Social Sciences, Dominican University, River Forest. Ukaegbu's teaching interests include social change, introduction to sociology, race and ethnicity, international development, global inequality, African societies, African diaspora, political economy, formal organizations, urban sociology, and global terrorism, among others. So as you can tell, he has a very lengthy background and he's extremely talented, qualified, and knowledgeable in his field. So please do feel free to ask questions, but we won't address the questions till the very end. And now I'm going to allow our guest speaker to begin his presentation. So welcome again.
Yeah, thanks Esther and Shane for the wonderful introduction. recall that the topic of this webinar was Western social thought. And I wanted to use that opportunity to summarize the ideas that have shaped Western society and continues to shape Western society. But during our informal meeting a few days before today, Esther and Shane smartly mentioned that it would be also good to look at the issues of change in the light of what has happened in America in the past few weeks, especially the case of the various protest groups. It was like a social movement for equality and justice. So I quickly saw the importance of that suggestion and changed my topic immediately to read social change and social movements. Where possible, I'll be drawing from examples from the events of the past 4 weeks in the United States. So if I may ask a question, begin with a question, and anybody can answer the question. What does the word change, what are alternative concepts of the word change to you? Alternative concepts to actually define the word change.
So one person here has mentioned growth, another person's mentioned dynamics, alteration in the activities, transformation, a new beginning, somewhat of a reform that changes dynamic, innovation, diversity.
All right, and more. Yes, all of those things actually apply to change. Change is transformation. Change is modification of existing condition. Change is alteration of existing condition. Change is reformation of existing condition. Is also revolutionization of existing condition. That is, you are moving away from the status quo to something new. And when it comes to social change, sociology defines it as a significant alteration or modification and or transformation over time in behavior and culture, beliefs, attitudes, values of a people. So that is moving away from the status quo. The way people behaved to one another before, the value system of a society before will change with social change. And a number of factors cause social change, such as new technology. You see how we relate to each other or one another because of a simple material culture known as a cell phone. So you can actually stay with somebody in a room. You won't be talking to one another. Everybody is actually looking at one piece of object. That is a complete change from the status quo ante of people trying to converse with one another. Everybody now is reading something on the cell phone. That's a change in attitude, a change in practice, also a change in culture. A culture of interpersonal relationship is now replaced with a culture of impersonality and individuality or individualism because of a simple product called the cell phone. It can also be as a result of population growth. Many people in the society have grown, and therefore there is much more division of labor in society as opposed to simple small societies where everybody knew everybody and almost doing the same thing. It could be because of a war or a kind of conflict. If you saw the way 9/11 changed America's behavior, America's trust of other people from other societies, how things happen in airports all over the world because of a single act that affected every corner of the globe. It could be because of intergroup conflicts, two groups fighting. It could be because of a change in the natural environment, you know, and of course, our concern today could be a result of a change, a result of the work of social movements, which is similar to what happened or what has been happening in America in the past 4 weeks, especially because of how George Floyd was killed in the hands of a white police officer. All right, so we define social change as an organized collective activity to bring about or resist change. That's important. Social movement is not always to bring about change. It can also occur by people who want to resist change. In this country, for instance, there are pro-choice movements. There are also anti-choice movements. Anti-choice movements want to resist the issue of abortion. Pro-choice movements want to promote the issue of abortion. It also takes place in feminist movement. There are women who are anti-feminism, and there are women who are feminist and pro-feminism. It's important. It's not always a radical change from the status quo to something new. I know change is dynamic, but change being dynamic can also be backwards or forwards. That's what social movement definition wants us to understand. So there are quite a number of examples of social movements. The people who actually organized abolitionism in the past in this country was a social movement. People who were looking for votes, who were looking for the right to vote by women or the suffragists, or the right to vote by minorities, the blacks, the same thing. They were engaged in social movements, or the civil rights movements, who wanted only to be included in society. They were not asking for a drastic revolution or changing the American principle of existence. They were simply looking to be or asking to be included. And that quest still remains. It hasn't been completely resolved. If it were, George Floyd wouldn't have happened the way it happened. The women's movement, anti-Vietnam War movement, now Black Lives Matter. If anybody, if we were skeptical or unsure about Black Lives Matter or about the durability of Black Lives Matter, George Floyd's episode has now brought it to a foundation that Black Lives Matter will remain a strong part of social movements in American society. But it's not guaranteed, as I will show later on. Now, how do social movements emerge in society? And as I saw the descriptions or the introductions or when participants were joining, I saw that quite a number of sociologists are registered for this this webinar, and that's very interesting. Very seasoned sociologists, professors of sociology, that's very welcome, actually. So there are quite a number of other theories of social movement, but I've chosen two here, which are two of the most popular among the sociological discourse of social movements. One is relative deprivation. Relative deprivation. And that is defined as a conscious feeling of a gap, a discrepancy between expectations and realities, a gap. Why have American Blacks continued to protest since the end of slavery in 1863, proclamation up until now, as we speak, they're still protesting. That is what they expected from being free from slavery has not materialized. That is relative deprivation. Oh, we should be included, we should be part of, we should be harmonized with society, there should be colorblind situations, nobody should discriminate against anyone. But you see that centuries after the emancipation, American Blacks continue protesting. That's a good example of relative deprivation. What we expected is not the way it is. So that is, things are not as good as we had hoped it would be. So somebody that is relatively deprived will be comparing himself or herself with another group. And I've given an example here taken from another source. That is blue-collar workers, that is working class, and then their managers. They work in the same firm. Imagine a firm that manufactures machines. There is the factory and there are administrative offices. In the morning, the managers come with their ties, with their briefcases, and stay in single offices. And when they go home, after work, they enter their cars and go to the suburbs, single houses, big houses, and workers go back to their single family row houses. And they will always be comparing themselves with managers. And this is the basis of labor unrest, constant labor unrest in many societies because of this relative deprivation. Yes, we put in long hours as workers. These people simply stay in air-conditioned offices and still earn more than we do, live in better places. I'm trying to lay the foundation for the meaning of relative deprivation, you know. And then the disadvantaged group must perceive that its goals cannot be reached by conventional means. So we cannot achieve our goals by simply going to report or going to sign contracts, which we don't agree with, or believing that the managers will actually be kind enough to give us what we want. No. So what do? We strike. That is labor movements. Or the case of blacks, Black Lives Matter comes into, here. Then there's also another approach, another theory, that is the theory of resource mobilization. For a social movement to endure, it has to lay the foundation for acquiring resources and using those resources efficiently. Resource mobilization refers to acquisition of resources. Where are you going to have an office? How do you recruit your supporters? How do you make sure that leaders continue? What of money to pay your workers or people who are volunteering to give them some stipends? How about leadership? Will it continue? And that was part of why the civil rights movement actually succeeded the much it did. It was able to acquire and maintain resources. It was able to have continuous leadership even after Martin Luther King was killed in 1968, till the movement continued. And very often, social movements do have charismatic leaders. And there are so many examples from around the world. Yes, the Gandhi of India is known as one of the charismatic people in human history. Martin Luther King is one of them. Cuba of Castro, one of them. You can go, Mao Zedong in China, one of them. You can go on and on, looking at leaders who are charismatic, and many also in this country. This country's history. Then we are advised that social movements should avoid false consciousness. That is, believing that the people they are fighting for, they are fighting against, that is the dominant group, that their interests are in line with their own interests. Marx tells us that the interest of the dominant group is never in line or does never align with the interest of the subordinate group, labor and capital. And that can be applied to any kind of social movement. The oppressed, according to Marx, must not believe that the oppressor will always, because of kindness, change its mind or his mind or their minds in favor of the subordinate group. That is the concept of false consciousness. Then we come to the new social movement of our time. These are also organized collective activity. They address improvements in the quality of life of people. New social movements. And very often educated middle class are very much represented in the new social movements. The women's movement, very well-educated women, and now you have many women in managerial positions in American society and the world over. Or the movement of gay rights, gay and lesbian rights, also middle class populations very much represented, and also the almighty environmental movement. Yes, many people who are in the environmental movements, animal rights, environmental rights, reforestation movements, the right to save the whales, the movement to save lions in the safari of East Africa and South Africa. All of these people are actually well-educated people. The living wage movement, which started in the 90s in this country, all of these, you see middle-class populations being, and the new social movements are very skeptical about the role of government in changing society. They don't talk about overthrowing government. They may criticize and protest. They can harass officials. You know, the tree huggers, those who go and hug trees and ask the government to kill them and shoot the trees. Those are the kinds of things they do. They're not looking for structural or foundational restructuring of society. They're asking just for reform. Change your habit about how you use the environment, if you're talking about environmental movement. And also, some of them are equality movements. The case of the civil rights is very interesting. Some people think that American blacks in this country are looking for a transformation of American society. Take it away from capitalism and make it communist socialism. No, they have never done that before. They have always been asking the American society simply to include us. That is, to include them. It's an equality movement as opposed to a revolutionary movement of structural transformation. So, and the new social movement can be seen worldwide. Yes, global warming, endangered species, all of these kinds of examples. Yes, where we are today brings us to the contemporary state of social movements. Many of you are members of many of you are bloggers. You're members of internet listservs. You are in chat rooms, and you actually enlist with like-minded people without face-to-face interaction. You may not know 90% of the people you talk to. So, in other words, the information technology that consumes us today, they act as an electronic village. That is what Schaefer actually calls it, an electronic village. And that's a very good description. You see people who are members of any of these groups believing in themselves, responding to a particular stimuli in the same way, like villagers do in a simple society. So you have computer-mediated communication, in various devices, iPad, the cell phone, the desktop, the laptop, all of those Then you have things, text messages, Instagrams, Zoom as we're using it now, the Skype. All of these things are, in fact, agents of social change because, yes, human beings are the immediate agents of social change. They bring about the change. But all of these things are, they mediate the process of actually bringing about that change. They're very powerful in constructing, change in society itself. All right, let's look at a few theories of change. We don't have enough time to do all those. There's what sociologists call the evolutionary theory of change. And the evolutionary theory of change states that society is viewed as moving in a linear path. It moves in a line, in a straight line, from one phase or stage to another. And each stage is a superior stage compared to a previous one. So in this case, evolution can be interpreted to be progress. But sociologically speaking, that's a debatable question. So that's evolutionary theory. And Auguste Comte, a French sociologist, those of you who are sociologists here must know this man. He is the founder. He was the man who coined the word sociology. Human society moves forward from mythology to the scientific method. And when you come to scientific or positive method, you no longer believe that everything is actually the work of myth or supernatural. In the positive method, scientific method, everything must be done empirically. Observe, record, collect data, interpret, and then disseminate. You just don't speculate in a scientific method. That's Auguste Comte. He's also an evolutionist. He thinks that during his time in France, he thought that the stage of Europe was the superior stage of human civilization, that every society was going to copy the European model as the best way. And sociologists were angry with him in a way, saying that he was ethnocentric and in fact somehow racist. Émile Durkheim, also another Frenchman, the same thing. Society moves from simple to complex social organization. Also evolutionary theorist here. Then there is the conflict perspective, because evolutionary theory aligns more to the functionalist perspective. There's the conflict perspective, which by itself is evolutionary. That is it begins with the work of Karl Marx. Karl Marx understood that society will always change from one stage to another. But the change is driven not by progress in a particular phase, but by the nature of exploitation in a particular phase. The nature of exploitation in a particular phase determines what change is going to take place. For instance, in every human society at any age, somebody is being exploited. And that exploitation brings about some kind of clash. In ancient societies, slaves were exploited by their masters. Under feudalism, peasants were exploited by the nobles. Under capitalism, workers were exploited. And Marx would say they continue to be exploited by capitalists. And each time he changes to a new phase. And his final phase will be the phase of a classless communist system. Now we know that some societies tried it. Now we know where the world is. The world has not actually materialized in the way Karl Marx envisioned it. But there's something fundamental about Karl Marx, that you cannot talk about social inequality without Marxist theory. So even if his evolutionist communist system has failed at this time, we still credit him with a very powerful theory of social inequality. And therefore, inequality very often brings change by clashes, you know. All right, we go to another aspect of social change, which is resistance to change. Yes, it is not always that people accept change. People will some people will accept it, others won't accept it. And there are several reasons why people don't accept change. One is vested interest. Look at what has happened in the coal mining sector. Who is fighting against new energy, solar, hydro, wind, you know, the green energy? Who is fighting against it? Coal mining, fossil fuel of oil, because it will cost them something if those kinds of energy actually appear. Those who will experience costs, not those who will experience rewards, you know. Also, some oppose change because of potential economic losses. Manufacturers might not actually implement safety standards because of what it will cost. All workers in a tire industry or in a cotton industry must wear masks. But if you go to big textile manufacturing firms, you might see workers not wearing masks. Why? Because the people who manage the place want to save money. That's opposing, you know, change. And there are also people who oppose change because they will lose employment. And there are so many stories about that. But it happens that technological change has actually been creating more jobs than the opponents actually have been able to themselves predict. Opponents of technological change always predict that technology will make them lose jobs. The Luddites in the Industrial Revolution, the saboteurs in France, and many others. But we see that employment has been good. However, we don't know how much that will last in the future because of robots taking over the manufacture of things from people. There are people who resist change because of value system. All religious groups, the Amish might not like cell phone because they think it is something bad for humanity, is changing people's lives very badly. And you know, other people like that. Also, people might actually resist change because they cannot use the new, they cannot actually operate in the new social system. So an old man or an old woman will not value text messaging because he or she doesn't know how to do that. And therefore, he or she thinks and begins to badmouth, you know, text messaging just because he or she cannot, you know, use it. And then, although these technologies are actually bringing good change, sometimes what they are supposed to do are good, but the unintended consequences tend to be also destructive. Let's take the issue of IT and social change. Well, the manifest function, that is the intended, expected consequence of IT and its expansion is to actually make life easy for people. You want to send money from here to someplace, 1 minute it is there. You want to send a message to somebody in Delhi, oh, it's there. In Qingdao, oh, it is there. Oh, in Lagos, it's there. Anywhere in the world, in the Philippines. However, some of the consequences are negative. Have you heard of internet fraud, computer fraud, identity fraud? That's not why Apple, Microsoft, Coniform, or Intel, all of these, you know, companies that do all of, that's not why they are doing those things. They are doing those things to enhance living. But unintended or latent function, unintended, unexpressed, unexpected consequence of IT has also costs. So I've given you an example of identity theft, computer fraud, privacy invasion. These are not why they were actually constructed. And very often too, there is a cultural lag between what we call material culture and non-material culture. So the cultural lag in IT, all these things are very good. We can do everything, you know, but the value system, the basic principle of Western society, for instance, is privacy and freedom. We find that when all this change technologically, we don't easily invent the value system to follow them. So today we are debating whether to emphasize national security or whether to emphasize individual freedom when it comes to IT. Should the government bug everybody's computer or cell phone, or listen to everybody's cell phone in order to know what people are thinking, to save American society, to save the Indian society, to save the French society, to save England, or to save Nigeria? Or should we actually emphasize human freedom and privacy? And we haven't come to a conclusion yet. And that is what is called cultural lag. The concept, the idea of cultural lag is that material culture changes faster than the non-material culture. For you to invent the value, to invent, sanction, confirm the value system that will follow the new invention is always difficult and always hard to come by, you know. Okay, why is it not going again? Okay. Okay, I think that's the end of it. So where we are now is that social change is fine, but we should be able to look at the manifest function, what we intended to do, and the latent function, what we didn't think about. And the lesson here is that for any aspect of change, especially formal social change or technological change or technical change, you should consider the intended consequences and also think of what are the things we didn't factor in this invention or innovation. All right, I think I better stop there. If you have, I know you have some questions to ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you have questions now, you guys can send them in the chat or in the Q&A function, and we will do our best to go through as many as we can. So we have one person here who asked a question. How can we bring positive change in society during something like this pandemic that's going on right now?
Well, the positive change will depend on several factors. One is the leadership. How do they define the problem? And how do they convince the followership to actually accept their definition of the problem? And what are the resources for solving those problems? I don't know that we need a special type of society simply because we had a pandemic. After all, there was a pandemic in 1918. You know, the world normalized and became a human society as it used to be, a society of interpersonal relationships. And I do predict that it will happen in the same case, the same way here. Yes, we have many alternative ways of interacting these days, but nothing actually supersedes human relations. If we don't actually reinvent or reignite human relations at the end of this pandemic, we may all go crazy, staying in our houses and working. So the positive change will be the recognition of the problem by leaders and followers, the non-politicization of this big problem, and then moving forward to regain ourselves once we have had either a vaccine or a very potent cure to, I don't see us, we'll go back to normal at some point, and it will be a function of technological change, scientific technological change in a vaccine and in treatment.
Okay, we have another question here. Do you think that the Black Lives Matter movement justifies the violent protest in the US?
No, I can't just formally say, yes, the Black Lives Movement justifies the violent protest in the US. However, it is if you are a student of social change, you will know that a crowd or a mob is inherently violent. So very often, you will see people with variegated intentions in the group. Some people may be thinking that by being violent, they're making their case. But it doesn't justify the burning of houses, the looting of places, doesn't justify it. But the point is that inherently, mob action is, often spontaneously violent, either for individual profit or for people who think legitimately they are going to make their case by being violent, but nothing justifies it.
Okay. And we had a few questions asking how can we deal with addiction to social media?
Addiction to social media, that's a very good question, a difficult one to actually to answer. To deal with addiction to social media is to remove it. Once it is in the hands of people, especially the young generations from millennials and upwards, it will always be used by anybody who has it in his or her own hands. I have not seen any place that there are some suggestions or prescriptions to reduce addiction to social media. And I don't know the statistics, the rate of addiction of to social media, but assuming that people are fully occupied in a day, they are working in places that they're regulated, in offices and all this, at least those times, they're not using the social media to do anything. So in an 8 to 12 hour period of a day, if the majority of the people are employed, then they will use the social media, less, except those who are, private employees or people who are privately, individually employed or so, or young people. But young people will grow out of it also with time. Having entered formal employment, they are restricted as to the time they can use those things. So addiction to social media is something more about age, than actually a particular prescription of an illness.
We have another question. We've had a few questions about this. How can activists continue to uphold social movements even though they're experiencing harassment from authorities and being red tagged as terrorists?
And who as terrorists?
So the activists and protesters, how can they uphold social movements when they are experiencing harassment from authorities and being red tagged as terrorists?
Oh, okay, I see. Well, the government will always, as authorities now, that's government, they will always proclaim that they are providing security to the population. So that is their job constitutionally, So you cannot see any kind of social movement visible, active social movement, sometimes antagonistic social movement to government that goes without harassment by the government. There'll always be police to keep law and order, you know. So because social movements come and go, they have their active time, very visible time. They also recede, either when they've achieved their goal or when they have formalized into a bureaucracy. So that contradiction between activism and political authorities, harassment, will always be there, you know. And it is in the interest of the authorities to actually label social movements as terrorists in order to make them look bad in the eyes of the public.
And I think we have time for only one more question. So there's a lot of questions here, but we are running out of time. So
okay.
How about we go with this question here? Is change always a good thing?
Wow. Well, yes, there's something in sociological analysis that says that change is a truism. In fact, it says that if there is any law in sociology, it is the law of change. That there must always be change. But change is sometimes forward, sometimes backwards. So change is a good thing in some circumstances, but not a good thing in other circumstances. So I cannot say that change is always a good thing. There are those who want, that's what is called reactionary movements, those who want to go back to the past, you know, or conservative movements, those who want to keep what is now, what exists now. So those kinds of people, reactionary, those who want to go back to the past, perhaps might not be as good as those who want to move forward and leapfrog to something new. And it depends on what and where and how that change actually takes place. But human existence has shown that progress is made by moving from one particular, the present now, and going into the future, if we use the evolutionary paradigm as a way of understanding social change.
Okay, great. So that's all we have time for today. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of your questions, everyone, but I hope that you did learn something and you did take something valuable away from our presentation today. I just wanted to say thank you again, Dr. Ukaegbu, for your presentation and for your very insightful conversation. I think it's an important one and very relevant. Once again, I do want to remind everyone that we already have your information that is required for us to be able to send you an e-certificate. So please give us a few days. We will send it to you by email, and we have all the information we need already. So no need to worry about that. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today and for participating and for the good questions. So I'm going to end it here, and everyone take care and stay safe. Thank you again, Dr. Ukaegbu.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the participants. I wish we had all the time for us to keep talking about this. All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys. So we'll end it here now.